Hi, good morning. Buenos días. First, I introduce myself. My name is Juan José Vila, and I'm the president of AFIAL. AFIAL is the Audiovisual Manufacturing Importers Association of Spain, and I'm also a member LSC of the AVIXA organization, so I represent two roles here, and this AVL Summit is the result of a deep collaboration that we are doing during years between AFIAL, AVIXA, and ISE. So today we are going to have 4 conferences, and it will be diverse content. Overall, we will have 2 content related to AV and sports, which is very interesting, and we have the second part of the, well, we will have a break between these 2, and then we will have a lunch break, and then we will serve some food at the middle of the day before we go into the last 2, from topics like related to lighting and staging, Eurovision, and the transition from a classic theater performance that used to be designed with tungsten lighting to LED. How is this transition to that classic performance? How we convert to LED without taking out the ambient and the design, no? And we are struggling a little bit with the entrance of the show, so that's the reason that our people will still come. There are registered to this attendance more than 80 people, so we will see, because we are running a little bit late. But for respect to you, the audience that you are here today, we are not going to delay anymore, because I'm sure that you have more things to do, and we don't want you late for your next meeting. And to introduce the presenter, the first presenter today, I want to say that this double is by 2 times a special thing for me. First, because, I forgot to say this. Thank you. AI is going to change the world, and is going to change the conference as well. So we have AI translation in real time. So if you scan the QR, you can hear the conference in Spanish language, just translated by an AI, which is very, very interesting to see how it works. Because I see the translations not in real time, but in real time is very, very interesting. Okay, so let's go for the conference. Not this one. Sorry. So as I said, this conference is 2 times special for me. One, because I know Brew from last year, and he has become a friend because we share some experience during last year and this year, and I'm sure that the ones that you know Brew, he told you what he enjoyed before the show, and at IEC we write together for a charity cause, raising funds for people that are backstage industry, and also because at my home you smell tennis in all the rooms, from my kids that are strong players, and even my wife that is still competing in 45 or 46 years. Sorry. So she's dead. Sorry, I said your age. So, so please welcome to Brew.
Buenos dias, good morning. So thank you for all for coming. My apologies, I'm going to kind of try and follow a script here, only because there's quite a lot that I want to try and get through today, and just want to kind of keep it on track. So over the next hour or so, I plan to discuss how we integrate our various audio, intercom, and broadcast systems together to deliver a wide array of services for a diverse number of users and customers to deliver the championships. As Fran said, thank you very much. Yeah, we've cycled together, we talk about tennis, it's fantastic. My name's Brew. I started out in musical theatre. That's kind of where I entered this industry. Much of my career has been focused on comms or intercom, and it was back in 2011 that was my first championships. I was brought in to look after the 20 or so intercom panels that we used for the relatively new electronic line calling system. We needed to serve the operators, the officials, so they could communicate with one another and deliver that service. So except for a few Olympic and Commonwealth opening ceremonies for the fairly big shows, I've been there ever since. And it was back in 2017 that a staff role was created, and now under the management of Andreas Krasanthu, the technology service manager who's kindly joined us down here, and supported by the wider technology team. In a nutshell, I'm responsible for everything that you hear on the grounds. So, no need feet. Where's my clicker? Right. So you might be forgiven that thinking, those that you don't know much perhaps about Wimbledon or tennis, that it's just maybe one tennis match or maybe two tennis matches, a men's and women's final that happen on this place called Centre Court. You might even be aware that there is a number one court, so there are two, but it's a lot bigger than that. So where do we start? Back in 1877, over a period of 11 days, a tournament that was hosted by the then All England Croquet and Lawn Tennis Club. The competition was held for 22 men. They each paid £1 guinea, which is like proper old English money. I won't even bother to try and compute that to something. There was only 6 scheduled days of play because there was a big county cricket match that was about the same time, and everybody wanted to go and do that. For the final, there was a temporary stand built for 30 people, and the attendance was 200 for that final back in 1877. The event, this is just an artist's representation of it, was not too far from our current home, a place called Walpole Road, still in Wimbledon, but a bit down the road. In 1922, we moved, and now the renamed All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club moved to Church Road, which has been our home ever since. So fast forward to 2023. The 136th championships. We had a record of attendance of over 1 million guests through our gates over the Wimbledon fortnight. Not to mention the almost 10,000 we had down at Roehampton for our qualifying event, and then the 70... Well, let me get the numbers right here because it's a big one. So 370 million, who watched at home on telly. A bit of a contrast. So today the championships is comprised of 22 competitions. Up there on the screen in front of you, that equates to a whopping 740 tennis matches. And that tops out at something like 1,300 hours of tennis over the fortnight. A bit of a step change. So all of those matches take place on our 18 courts. We have 2 stadiums with retractable roofs, centre and number 1 that you might have seen on the telly. We have 2 open-air stadiums, Court 2 and Court 3. Then we have our other 14 open courts, which we put temporary seating on to allow our guests to come and watch the tennis. We also have our public viewing areas, Orangi Terrace, The Hill, and new for 2023, we had a big screen down in the Southern Village. Then we have our broadcast and our media and press facilities, and new for 2023, we had our brand new media theatre and the smaller interview rooms and production spaces and engineering spaces. We've also built a museum, one of only 8 in the world, which you can view exhibits about tennis, the history of Wimbledon, and the sport at large. And then finally, we have regular offices and meeting spaces, where there are a number of staff members there. We have all the kind of usual kind of teleconferencing facilities that you might require. So there's a lot going on. Oh, and then there's also our community tennis centre down at Rains Park and our community sports ground at Roehampton, the home of our qualifying event. All these three sites are all connected together. So we are a multifaceted ground, a very busy site, very different to what I've actually experienced myself in other sporting venues and stadiums, where you might only have one 90-minute or maybe even a few consecutive days of events, but those events might have distinct sessions with plenty of space in between them. For the championships, we do 14 days straight. So that's the what. Let's get into some of the detail of what we have. So we're going to go in kind of reverse order, focusing on our public address system. We'll start off with, there we go, our loudspeakers. So across all our courts and permanent spaces, we have interleaved A and B circuitry. This model is applied across all 18 of our televised courts, and there's a few minor exceptions, but if we think about Court 14, we have 4 Tannoy VLS 15s as an A-B pair diagonally across the court, and that's the kind of model that's kind of repeated across everything else. Looking here at Court 18, because it's a slightly different shape to some of the other ones, we have this year, sorry, we have, sorry, missed my notes. Court 18, that's what we're talking about. So we actually have 5 circuits on this space. We have the normal kind of similar to what we'd have on Court 14 court side. Then we have the seating block at the north end, and then we have the gods up on top of the broadcast centre. But we're still following the A-B pair of how it's all arranged. This year, have I missed a page? I've missed a slide. Okay, right, sorry about that. On Court 12 this year, we're going to have we'll have 4 new JBL CBT 1000s and Yamaha VX5s doing the infill around this. On centre court here, we have 73 Martin Audio AMS 10, sorry, across 24 circuits. We're still following the A-B pair, but because the space just gets bigger, we have more discrete circuits. Throughout our permanent spaces and buildings and all our habitable spaces, we, depending on the performance requirements of the space, we generally use TOA, Yamaha or JBL, but each of those spaces is evaluated on merit. Our presentation spaces and our member spaces and player spaces are all music rated, yet the staff circulation and kind of utility spaces are just speech rated. Most of this is all 100-volt line. We have a large array of loudspeakers that are picked for the best use of what we require in hand. Last time I checked, so last week I checked, we had, just at Church Road alone, we had something like 900 discrete amplifier circuits. They feed 3,000 loudspeakers that we have across the grounds. That's not including the additional ones bought in by our Championships audio guarantee for the Championships, RG Jones, who bring in a large stock of loudspeakers. I actually found an article in LSI from back in 2002, kind of some 20 years ago, which referenced RG Jones doing some installation work, and it was only half that number of loudspeakers. So we also have these temporary spaces, so the hill and the big screen from the Southern Village this year. We have some 3,000 people on the hill watching the big screen. We wanted to deliver the sound of tennis as best we can to all of those people. For this particular application, we use Martin Audio's MLA Min stacked either side at the bottom of the screen, and then we also do above the vertical living wall, we have some stacks on the top of there. We also have a third stack out far towards Court 18, but we only use paging out of that. We don't use program out of that, so we don't interfere with the playing activity on Court 18. Down in the Southern Village, we had Martin Audio's new Taurus boxes for that brand new screen last year, and all of that worked really well. We also have the golf course. So we hold there's a number of temporary structures that get installed over there. Our colleague dining hub, our guest arrivals, partner activations, and the queue. And depending on what time of day we are and where we are within the championships, the content that we're playing out of those loudspeakers and what they're all doing will change. We generally use the D&H MH30 music horns along the queue, and we do that so we can mount them on the same poles and positions that we mount the Wi-Fi access points and other kind of CCTV services on, so we can use just make the most of being efficient with our cabling and who's installing all of that. So that's the loudspeakers. What about our amplifier spaces? So how do we actually drive all of that? I actually had the great honour of sitting down with a gentleman called Robin Jones. He's the son of Reginald Jeffrey Jones and the founder of RG Jones. One of the oldest sound companies in the world, and still, as I mentioned, our audio supplier and great support to what we do at Wimbledon. They're still based in Wimbledon, as they have been, but back in 1975, with the advent of a thing called the Sports Safety Ground Act, 1975, someone at the AELTC gave Robin a call and asked him to come and have a look at a somewhat aged tannoy PA system that they had. It went some way to cover centre court and, at that point, the adjacent number 1 court. But there was something, something wasn't quite right. There's a few hisses and buzzes and a few loudspeakers not working. That was all centred in one rack room under the terraces at the north end of centre court. We now have something like 10 rack rooms scattered across all of our buildings. These aren't solely audio equipment rooms. Some are shared spaces with other technology services, our general IT network, or our radio systems, or just other technology services. We're generally converged, as pictured here, the Crown DCI series of amplifiers with the BlueLink N versions, what we're using. We use the Dante versions for some of those field locations, like out on the golf course. And there are some loudspeakers that we use different amplifiers for, the Duran audio stuff that we have on court number 2 and 3, and the Nexos on court number 1. They have their own unique amplifiers, but generally we're on the DCI end. So up until a couple of years ago, our kind of standard model for making our rack rooms work is paging being our most high priority signal. We would use a pair of Tower SX 2000 AO units. They would feed into our pair of Soundware Blue 806s, and then we'd use 160s if we need more horsepower. And then we'd go down through our amplifiers and we'd create this a BlueLink ring. So down through the A equipment and then loop back through the B equipment, creating a nice ring for cable redundancy. All makes sense. Since the move to digital processing back in 2002, when our friends at RG Jones installed the first BSS Soundwebs, the 1988s, the original Soundweb Greens, one of which is actually displaying on the Harman stand here. The system has continued to grow. So originally 1 rack room, and then in 2009, with the redevelopment of the Southern Apex, that went to the 3 rack rooms. So the bus count on those Soundweb Greens, we kind of ran out. So we moved over to the Soundweb Blues. Now at 3 rack rooms and linking into broadcast, our BlueLink ring topping out at 256 channels, we were kind of hitting the end stop of what we could do. So nothing ever stays still for very long at Wimbledon. There's always change, there's always build, there's always evolution. So we continue to grow, and we've had more, and I say now we're up to our 10 rack rooms, so we kind of hit the space. So we'd been using CobraNet as the audio bus between our rack spaces. When we added in court number 1, and about that time, we moved to then 6 rack rooms. So we transitioned from CobraNet to the now prolific Dante as the model to transport our audio between our rack spaces. But we were still having we still followed this ring topology of our audio bus within the rack spaces. something wasn't quite right. Every now and again, we would get an audio dropout, just for a second or so. It was every engineer's favorite issue. It was intermittent. It was quick. There didn't appear to be any kind of correlation of when it was happening. And some were saying it was just the golden ears of the audio team that would actually notice it. So in hindsight now, the issue was the BlueLink ring reselecting its clock marks just because of its high tolerances of how it wanted to work. But we weren't actually able to get to the detail of why this was happening. And I say, it was sporadic and infrequent, so we kind of put the issue to the back burner because there was lots of other works going on, lots of other change, lots of other things happening, so we just put it to one side and we thought we'll come back to it. But how are we going to get to the bottom of this issue of our audio DSPs being unhappy? How are we going to work out when audio dropouts were occurring in our flexible architecture? So what we did was create a simple tone generator and an input meter trigger, which basically, graphics have moved on, but basically the detail in here is still the same. So we basically generated a tone generator and an input trigger, and that would create a ticker count for how many times we had had an audio dropout issue. This was great. Actually, the keen-eyed among you here will see that this is the Soundweb London Architect UI. We still use London for all of a lot of our systems. That's because John Berry, head of installations at RG Jones, and the team had developed an awful lot of intricate programming work that went together to make the championships work. So when Audio Architect came out, we, with the support of Harman, stayed with London Architect to do what we're doing. I personally prefer it, but I am a comms guy at heart. So we had our ticker going on here, but we were never able to try to absolutely get to the bottom of what's going on. But then the global pandemic happened. COVID arrived. The grounds of the AELTC went silent for the first time outside of world wars. Now, I've always kind of dabbled with kind of electronics and little projects around the, on the side and stuff like that. So one of my little lockdown projects was a weather station, which I built and kind of had some sensors, and I fed those all into a little Raspberry Pi computer, and then using Node-RED, a kind of programming platform that I was just getting to grips with, InfluxDB and Grafana, I was logging all of those inputs, all of that information into a time series database and displaying it. So I then had the idea, could I use this to try and track down and give us some more detail on what the issue here was happening? So with the ground silent, virtually nothing going on, we had this kind of unique state where everything was stable, nothing else was going on. We had plenty of time to explore and investigate. So with myself on site and John and Andy and the rest of the team from Harman all working remotely, I began kind of taking this information that we'd been collating here as a ticker and putting it into a graph and time-stamping it. But also doing this across all of our rack rooms. Was this dropout happening in more than one place? Was it happening only on one box in a rack room? Was it happening on everything in a rack room? Was there multiple rack rooms that this was all happening with at the same time? What we're able to do was set this going and then leave it for a 3-week period, what would have been the championships, and see whether these instances were happening or what had gone on. We then kind of went to the whiteboard, right, how can we try and ascertain what's going in here? What can we do? How differently can we plug all this together? So we literally took the whole of one of the rack rooms apart and set to plugging it up in different orders and trying to catch up, work out how we could best make this work. The solution it was to have a single Dante touch point per a BlueLink ring. What we created with our redundant ring was 2 diametrically closed touch points to an external clock source. So with the high tolerances of BlueLink and PTP clocking, however good your network is, it's never going to be absolutely perfect, basically creating this clock differential. So our model now is to have a stack of Dante connected DSP, then we have a single box. We now use the Harman Blue DANs to connect our Dante environment to our amplifier stack and a blue link ring down that. This has been now working very well, and we think we've made that a very solid and stable platform. So to kind of recap what we've got in our rack spaces, out in the field, we've got an AB wired pair. They connect back to our rack spaces over fire-protected cable. They're all driven by multiple circuits, ultimately fed from our Dante network. Our mixing and processing is performed in our SoundWeb DSPs. Well, most of it is. We'll come on to the championships bit shortly. And then out in the field, perhaps on the golf course where we can't get our structured cabling back to our PA rack spaces, we use the Dante-enabled amplifiers. Moving on to our inputs. So our first and foremost is our safety system. That is of paramount importance. That is our highest priority, our most important audio signal into our system. We have a number of paging stations around the grounds, and actually one of the nuances and things that I really like about this, there used to be one in our chief executive's office and the head of ticketing, because back in the day, they would at moments address different areas of the grounds to kind of welcome them or give them updates about weather or that kind of things. However, we've now migrated to a world where the safety system is purely used for safety messaging. Our grounds announcer uses that image on the right there. We use a Glen Sound Inferno commentary unit. There's a couple of reasons for that. A, we wanted to have more granular control of where that ground announcer was being sent and how that was being routed and control over that audio signal. We also wanted to have a nice chocolatey rich sound. However good your paging systems are, and by intent, they are sit up and pay attention instructions as opposed to warm and friendly updates about what's happening in the day. So we also needed to talk to the grounds announcer and cue them in, so a commentary style unit was very good. We have a number of QLab systems, one of which we use for our background music into various spaces. I like to play a lot of Christmas songs as we run up to the festive series. I use QLab to play that to basically as many destinations as humanly possible across the ground. We also have local inputs, so some of our suites and function spaces might have ability to just plug in an analog source. We also use a load of the Shure MXW radio mic systems for our presentation systems and kind of briefings within some of the hospitality suites. We tend to avoid local independent systems. Everything we do passes through our house processors, so we can route safety messaging through it, or at least duck that content if we decide we need to. We also have a load of what we could refer to as local paging systems. So these are perhaps for our ball girls and ball girls rest areas, so the team leaders in there can call out instructions to them, or it could be media press center calls, it could be player update calls. We use the Audio-Technica AT&D 8677 Dante mics for those. They seem to work really well for us. This is all transported over our kind of corporate Dante network from these edge locations back to our rack spaces where our processors is. We also have a significant number of hospitality spaces. These are maybe temporary spaces for the championships. These get built on our clay, acrylic, and hard areas of hard standing. And these activations might require their own music. They might want to connect that locally in the field. They might also want to use some of these radio mics or other sources. We generally use the kind of ordinate AVIO units to get those signals back to us. We also have our on-court flash interviews. So these are what's happened at the end of the singles matches, which are played out on centre, number 1, number 2, number 3, court 12 and 18. And in recent years, we've been using the short Axient digital series receivers coupled with ShowLink and spectrum monitoring and interface avoidance. So we're trying to do the radio mic solution as best we possibly can. So for all bar 12 and 18, we actually dual path these sources back to our rack spaces. They go via the corporate network for our digital Dante route, and then we also take the analog signals out the back of them, and we have an analog home run from where they're located back to our rack spaces, so there's an independent signal path. We also have our umpire microphones. Now, I could spend a whole day just talking about how all this works, but in a nutshell, so I'll try and do this bit at a fairly high level. We have a single microphone on the umpire's chair for the umpire. That's quite unique. Quite a lot of the other slams and tournaments will have multiple microphones in there, one for perhaps the broadcast, one for the PA, one for other services. I'm quite proud that the team managed to make that a single microphone, and it's the cleverness in the back end that gets it all to the right places. We use the Bayer Dynamic M201s. It's just a dynamic microphone. We found that they're actually really durable, just with their Rycoat covers on. If they accidentally get left out in the rain, we are, after all, an outdoor tournament. They survive quite well. They also do survive being hit directly with a tennis ball. So over the years, we've explored some other options, but we found the simplicity in this microphone is kind of far outweighed by any potential fidelity improvements with something else. The umpire's microphone actually goes through a passive transformer at the base of the chair. One of those outputs goes into our SoundWeb unit that's in the bottom of the chair. This gives our digital Dante route back to our rack spaces. We also have an analog path back from our umpire's chair, so we dual path that, and we also make it available to our host broadcast if they choose to take it. So, I said we use the SoundWebs to kind of do all our system processing and mixing for all of the permanently installed buildings and structures. But in recent years, we've moved to have a real physical mixing desk for all of the championships requirements. So since 2021, we've been using a pair of Yamaha Rivage series consoles, both with HY cards. Analog I/O is done. We actually put Rio racks in our rack spaces to ingest those analog signals. And this handles all the kind of champ-specific tasks, all the gig bits, if you like. Excuse me a moment. So the use of a real mixing console for the main event actually makes it really accessible for the wider audio team. We're all comfortable using a real mixing desk. Not everyone is comfortable with the details of where certain features are within the SoundWeb system. So having a real console, a standard audio mixer, makes that very accessible. But we don't, as standard and as straightforward as it is, there was always some nuances of using a regular audio mixer for the unique requirements that is the championships at Wimbledon. So thankfully, we had a great level of support from the Yamaha team to actually get these Rivage consoles in and make them work how we wanted them to work, not just how they were originally conceived to do. Out in our commentary boxes, we have these boxes that were developed by John and Nick, who sat with us here. This gives us audio out to all of our commentators in the on-court commentary booths. There's one of those between each chair. These are the people that are TV commentators, they're radio journalists, they could be our statisticians or any other things. And these, primarily coupled with the high-vision IPTV decoders, allow various different reporters to generate that off-tube commentary or generate packages to send back to wherever they need to. Then new for 2023 was our media theatre. This, we'll get into some of the detail about this, of how this actually all works, but in a nutshell, it was at its heart is a CL5. There's still some sound webs doing the back-end processing. We use the Yamaha MX418 microphones on the desk, ensure ULXD radio mics in the system. Outside of the championships, this space was conceived to also do a load of other functions rather than just be our press interview space. So it's actually equipped with a kind of 7.1-ish sound system. We've used D&B Y10s, Y subs, and 5Ss. All of this is kind of akin to give it that cinematic ability if we wanted to do those types of events. For audience questions, in the ceiling we've got 8 MX910 microphone arrays, and then the MXN5WCs in the ceiling. Now, these were a real integral part in making the design of this space work. We wanted to be able to do a voice lift across the room, but also have that time aligned and graded, so it felt natural around the room as opposed to always being drawn to the stage area. So when we first reared this head about this design space, PoE Dante ceiling speakers were not a thing. They just didn't exist. So we looked at lots of different ways to do it. When Shure eventually announced that product, it meant that we could put those up into the ceiling and not have to have loads more loudspeaker cables and lots of space that we didn't have for amplifiers. We've also got audio press boxes to do, if you turn up with your recorder, you can take the feeds from that. And then the front 3 rows are super user seats. They're all equipped with power, network connectivity, and audio feeds. So we use AVIAL units in there to be able to deliver back the 2 audio feeds for the room, as well as a headphone for any kind of sim trans work. I'm personally really proud of this place. Having started out in theatre and done music touring and a load of broadcast events, I was really pleased to be able to work closely with the WES, Wimbledon Broadcast Service technical team to make this the best we could. We've tried to plan for every eventuality in there, but just for the bits that we've missed, we've also added a load of facility panels so any extra equipment can be connected and make it all work. So that's all of the edge bits. The lumps of kit, roughly where they're located, and I'm sure you agree there's quite a lot to it. How do we actually make that all work? How do we actually make the system all sing and operate? The key bit is our primary audio control room. Anything you hear on the ground is controlled from this space. Any audio that happens anywhere is controlled from this room. So unlike other kind of similar sporting events that I've been involved in, you might have a human operator, like we have here. We've got a team at the back here that are looking after the tech for this space. There'll be a similar arrangement in the other rooms up and down the concourse here. We don't do that because we just partly the way that historically the event has kind of evolved and grown, but equally we're trying to be efficient with people and be a bit like a swan, have all, look like it's absolutely gliding along as a beautiful thing, but it's all the busyness and the legwork that's going underneath. So this is where it's all controlled from. In this room there would have, we have pictured there our audio operator that he sits there. I would normally be in the middle. We'd have our systems engineer, generally John Berry joining us here, would be sat to the right there, and then we have the comms engineer on the right-hand side. The audio engineer and the comms engineer are on 2 shifts just because of the duration of the day. Concentrating on the audio operator's position here. So we have our championships audio mixer, where we deal with any of the, I'll say the court mixes, anything perhaps on the golf course, the big screen mix, any of those items that are specific just to the championships. Then on those screens, we can pull up all of the multiple SoundWeb session files or radio mic programming software or any of the systems that we have. And the way we make that all work is with a big, there's no computer on the back of those screens, those are just terminals. So the way we've actually made this work is we use ADLINK's Infinity KVM. Big shout out to the ADLINK team at the back of the room there. So any one of those screens can display any one of the systems or services that we're running. It's just a keyboard and mouse video extension that works over IP. So within that room, we can move any of those sources around there. I quite like it. It works really well. But actually, here's a, we begin to get into some of the big rabbit holes now. While, yes, you can use keyboard shortcuts to navigate through different systems, when you've got 25 of them, it can be quite cumbersome. So in order to try and speed up that process of moving around the grounds, moving around the systems as we're either doing system checks or trying to fault find stuff, Andy actually developed a mechanism of using that little stream deck that sat there in front of him. So he's written a bit of code that integrates with the ADLINK API. So he can press a button on that Stream Deck, and it will pull up the center core array of systems on the screens in front of him. It's also integrated into the console, so it will then bring up the center core layers to the fore. Similarly, you can then step to core number 1, and when you hit that button, the screens will change and also the layers on the console. So it makes moving around the system and operating the system very, very quick and very easy to use. Right, our wall of sport. So all of those TVs on the wall are actually fed from Riedl's MediaNet. We put 3 microns up in MCR, where we collect 36 SDI video feeds. We do a MADI of program back and forth, and we do a MADI of comms forwards back and forth. We take those videos, that's the court mixes, that's the hill, that's the media theatre. We also have 8 freely assignable outputs, or inputs rather. I have a router panel, so I can pick any source that's within the broadcast matrix system and put it on any of our screens, which is really useful when we get to those flash interview moments, where actually we might want to take camera 4 because camera 1 is now blocked by something. So as we remote operate this, we can put as much vision as we can in front of our audio operator to see what they're doing. We also have several outputs of the KVM system that feed into those microns. So on the wall, we can put either picture, we have some IPTV boxes, so we can put scores on there, or we can put any of the computer systems. We also have those 2 multi-views. This is something that I'm particularly proud of that I put together. So, okay, right, it's just a 9-up multi-view. What's so special about that? But the audio meters on those multi-views, the left-hand side is the PFL of the umpire post-switch. Okay? The right-hand side is the AFL of the amplifier circuits driving that court. So what this allows us to do is look at the screen and have a really good heads-up display of what audio is going on where. How do we actually hear all that? Okay, if I actually step back to that kind of wider picture, you can see under the wall of sport we have a bunch of Genelec self-powered monitors underneath the screen. Those are all fed from the QL1 that's just behind the big tennis ball in the picture. So into that QL1, we take all of the court mixes, and we basically generate a room mix that comprises of all the tennis, but also we listen into the BBG's paging, the press calling, the competitors' paging. Often all of those functional areas are really busy delivering their main focus, running after, lost tennis balls or towels or bananas or chasing players down to collect their prize money. They're not audio people in those spaces. So if the microphone perhaps sounds a little bit distorted or not quite as clear, they're not likely to report that as a known thing. Whereas actually if we're just keeping an ear on that, we can try and be proactive to make sure all of the systems across the grounds are working as best they can. You know, things just might need a little touch or a little tweak here to keep this all working. Just also wanted to look back to our umpire's microphone, and more importantly, its switch. So the umpire signal needs to go to quite a number of destinations. It's all fed, obviously, into our championships mixer, but it also needs to go to broadcast. It needs to go to our intercom system for our statisticians and line calling teams. And the way that's all done is the switch on the umpire's chair isn't actually a mute switch. It's just a GPI into the sound web. But it doesn't actually affect any of the audio passing through that sound web in the bottom of the chair. It comes off that sound web as an ASCII string, and it goes into 2 of our QLab machines. These take those ASCII strings and turn them into an OSC instruction into the mixing console. So as you turn the switch on and off, you're actually muting and unmuting the channel strip on the console. This is really great because it means that any of the engineers can override that switch very easily by just pressing the mute button. So if we lost the sound web in the bottom of the chair, or if we lost network connectivity to the chair, we could just flip to our analog path umpire signal, and we could just manually open and close it. So this gives us a great level of redundancy in what we've got going on here. Now, as I say, all of this is centrally operated, centrally controlled. But we can't hear what's going on the ground. So what we do is we have a wider audio team who are out in the field, and they are our ears on the ground. We use comms to talk back to the audio engineer, so they will call back if there needs to be any level changes or tweaks. There are some spaces that we have our remote control, so we actually enable an operator or a user occupier of the space to use the system. So we use Crestron for some of our higher end systems in the clubhouse and our tier 5 and tier 6 dining areas. In recent times, we've actually been starting to use some of the stream decks to actually control some of those remote mixers and positions. It's quite quick to deploy, just using our network, because actually those stream decks aren't actually plugged into a computer at this end. They're plugged into a Raspberry Pi. We're running a bit of software called Companion and Companion Satellite, which basically means that the stream deck connects to a Raspberry Pi. That Raspberry Pi then connects back to a server application, which means that we can take that control interface anywhere on the network. And we can build different ones. So actually, do you know what? In the members' gym, they can just have one that's got a real knob on it, so they can turn the volume up and down. And those kind of things work really well. So how do we remote control all this? When we're not in that room, we use a bit of software called Real VNC. That works really well for, perhaps there might be a task that one of the team are looking at into a space, and they can remote onto one of the computers. That computer can still be visible, or that service can still be visible for the team here, keeping an eye on what's going on. But I can use my iPad, say, to control and remote into something. It also means that from here today, right here, right now, I could remote into the system and control any of those functions. So that allows us to do in-bowl PA tuning or deal with issues as they happen around the grounds. Now, say this team scattered around the grounds and in the control room, all of that kind of remote operation only works because we actually have a really efficient intercom system. As I said, I'm a kind of comms guy at heart, which was the main driver with this. So we have a load of real intercom panels in the room. I say back in 2011, I started out with 20-odd panels. We're now at about 150 endpoints with wired and wireless packs. The field engineers use Riedl's Bolero, so they can be stood by the side of the court. They can talk back in full duplex to our engineer in the chair and make a call for changes or anything like that. We also then use the read or smart panels to control the media net so we can route different things across the screen and across the video wall. We distribute the artist frames around the grounds to do various different functions, and we, as I say, use the MADI ports on our microns to do a lot of the bridging between our different Dante environments. So different Dante environments, okay? We actually have three, if I jump onto that, three kind of spaces, if you like, or environments. We have our closed Dante environment. This resides within our PA rack spaces. This is where the majority of our sound webs, our processors reside. This is where our kind of core infrastructure is on our closed audio network. We have our own core and edge audio network managed by the IT network team, but that sits in our world. Then we have what we refer to as our courtside services. This is the umpire's chair. This is the radio mics by side of court. Those are the tennis critical components that we absolutely need to guarantee. We can't have something happening in one of the hospitality suites affecting tennis on court. So that's kind of our highly protected services. And then our site-wide is kind of where everything else happens. So that could be the radio mics in this space. It could be the background music player for the room next door. A number of our function and meeting rooms were equipped with the Shure P300s, an MX710 and 910 microphone arrays to kind of enable video conferencing. What's been great is we've been able to deploy and bring online really quickly some of those spaces and equip them by just utilizing and leveraging the corporate network in order to bus all those signals back and forth. We actually use DDM to help us manage those Dante environments on the corporate network, which has been great because it's given us an awful lot of telemetry and logging and kind of being able to also restrict and open up certain bits of the system to do different things. Almost every controller and processor that we've got is now a network appliance. Converging everything on this kind of IP network is great for me, but I don't think anybody ever actually checked with the networks team that this is the way the world is going and are they happy with it. They've kind of been backed into this corner. But some sites don't do that. We do, and actually it works really well. I can take my comms panel and my KVM unit and I can go to almost any port on the grounds and plug it in and it will actually just work. So it's worth the effort. Right. So what's a day at the championships actually look like for us? We've covered the kit that we've got, roughly how we operate it, but actually what's the granularity of the day? So our morning shift would start at 7 a.m. First order after we filled the coffee machine would be to touch base with the BBC breakfast team. They're on site, they're doing live hits for national telly. So we take a split of their radio camera. We can then de-embed using the microns, the radio mics that they're using, so we can hear what they're saying. We also take a sniff of their production talkback, so we hear from the gallery and from them on the field when they're about to go live for their hits and where they're going to do their pieces, which is great because it enables us to do the next bit of our day without being heard live on telly. So by 7:15, we're out on the grounds and we're now checking all of the loudspeaker systems. It's a surefire way to get your 10,000 steps in before 10 a.m. in the morning. We try and do this in as targeted as way possible because there are other teams, there are other functions in and working at this point. So if we can be super targeted, A, we don't crash into the telly, but also we're not playing music or tone into spaces that cause a great deal of disruption for other people working around the grounds. As we approach 8 o'clock, we're kind of into checking our safety messaging system. All my colleagues will be used to hearing me do test announcements from our operations center. Then the team take a break for breakfast, and then we roll into getting everything out on court, getting the microphones out, deploying and testing all of those functions, the wet weather microphones, the radio mics, and all of the on-court comms. We've checked all of that. We're now in position for about 10:30 to hear the gates. Could the stewards now please open the gates announcement? We then start program content on the hill, and at this point, all of the engineers out in the field are calling back to our control room to validate that everything is working, or if any of those spaces need a little level tweak here or there. With play underway, our team do a constant revolution around all the courts, making sure everything is all right, as different umpires come on court, as play changes, as perhaps a speech is going to happen in one of the function spaces, and as they move on for that. And then at the end of the day, having done our shift change, the skeleton team that close out the day wait and hear that the gates are now closed, and that is our kind of like 18, 19-hour day. The system is vast. You can't see or witness all of that from any one point. You can't get direct vision on it all. So we're heavily reliant on remote system status monitoring. So here's something that we've kind of been building originally on a Raspberry Pi. You might hear that I'm a bit fond of those kind of things. And what we're seeing here now this is hosted on our Linux virtual machine. The temperature data up there is just coming off some little Arduinos or early Raspberry Pis that we've put into the rack rooms. Over MQTT, they feed into Node-RED running on this VM, and then this is all displayed in Grafana here. And then the green blocks are showing that we're pinging all of the devices in those relative areas, and they're all coming back good. Also within our Node-RED environment, we are probing the referees tournament management system, and we're using this to generate spoken alerts to us. Players on court, match about to finish, play suspended. With so much going on in the space, so many courts active, so many things being underway. Sorry, there we go, we're all good. It's impossible to have eyes focused on everything all of the time. So these audio alerts are great because we're able to take those into the intercom system so the engineers out on the grounds can have the respective alerts pertinent to what they're doing dialed into their comm system. So we can hear when a match is about to finish, when, is this indicating that I should be about to finish? Maybe that's what it is. We also use the speech announcements for if we have any status change of any of our equipment. This works really well, comes out with the intercom panel that sits on my desk up in the museum building, brings great joy to my wider team joined here when these announcements come out of my panel and disturb them from whatever they're doing if something's not right. I have one more thing to share. Background music. Not only is this used for playing Christmas songs, we use this to play a wide array of different content to different spaces. We like to kind of centrally control everything and manage everything because it stops you having to repeat that thing in various different locations. If you have one central content server, you can then just route that as a Dante thing to wherever you need it, as opposed to have multiple things playing different songs. So we use QLab. That has a number of tracks in it that plays that out. We feed those through the SoundWeb unit that is being controlled here. And this allows us to route different genres of content to different destinations. We've got some processing there so we can level those all out. But also driving that is a Node-RED scheduler. This allows us to very easily and very quickly change the time of when music should start, music should stop. And actually this and that screen to the right there have been so successful. Our wider TV team, my other colleagues in the technology department, have been able to utilize this without my involvement to change the content of what's playing in different spaces as required. Then using this scheduler, it allows us to quickly make those changes without the need to compile what is going on in the sound webs and disrupt that audio. So to kind of start to try and wrap this up, making this all work reliably and effectively does take a huge amount of effort from the whole audio team and the wider technology team supporting that. It's like the bricks in a house. There's lots of similar bricks, but layering them all together is what builds it into the big mansion complex together. We as a team spend a great deal of time planning and trying to work through the detail of all of this. It really is all in the detail. We will spend hours going over IP address schedules, how we should name a device, whether it should be a capital or lowercase t for temperature in the string. All of that, the naming formats, the document storage trees, this is the difference between doing kind of like one of those, a little one-off, one-hit standalone event and something that can be repeated and expanded and continue to grow as we have grown. But equally, don't be afraid if the process is not working to just go back to that whiteboard like we did with the whole BlueLink thing and actually just start afresh. What's the detail? How do we make this all work? Now, there is loads more that I can go into. We've not even touched on the QSYS system that we've got down at Rains Park or the Yamaha system that's at Roehampton. The type and size of this installation, if you can kind of take away from this, is for us, for me personally, the key is the simplicity, the repeatability, and the scalability. It's all about doing little things well and then just repeating that. To manufacturers listening, please continue to make some great products, but make sure that it's possible to easily integrate those with others. You might have a great sounding thing, and your UI and your web page to control it might be great for one of those, but when we've got 14 of them, I just don't have the screen real estate to have that thing across all the screens. What I want to be able to do is show my colleagues in the office just 14 little green boxes that everything's okay. At the end of the day, it is just a bit of wire and a magnet in that loudspeaker at the end, but the magic is the innovation between those 2 points. Thank you, Andreas, and my colleagues from the technology team for coming and joining us here, and Team RG Jones. And actually, there's a lot of the kind of manufacturers featured in there. If anybody's got any questions after this, we are around if you want to come and see us. But before I close, is there any questions from the floor? Cool. We're about all day if you want to grab us. Thank you very much, Fran, for inviting us to come and talk here. I say apologies, I did kind of rush through all of this. There is an awful lot going on, but I hope it's given you a bit of an insight. Thank you very much.